We found that the mummy known as Elder Lady, this mummy, people said she could be Queen T because there is a hair found in the tomb of King Tut in a box. They took the sample of this hair and they analyzed that with the hair of this lady. This Elder Lady, she's the daughter of Yuya and Tuya.
Nefertiti, the mysterious fate of Egypt's lost queen. What if the most beautiful woman in Egyptian history was actually murdered by a mysterious way, and her killer covered it up for 3,000 years? This investigation will expose the shocking truth about Queen Nefertiti's disappearance. A woman so powerful, she ruled as an equal to the pharaoh, then vanished without a trace. By the end, you'll discover which competing mummy is most likely the real Nefertiti, and learn about a discovery that reveals exactly how Egypt's most iconic queen met her end. The queen who ruled like a king. But first, who was Nefertiti really? And why would someone want her dead? Nefertiti wasn't just another pretty face in Egyptian history. This woman wielded power that would make modern world leaders jealous. Her name literally translates to "the beautiful woman has come." But beauty was just the beginning of her story. She married Amenhotep IV when she was only 15 years old. But this wasn't some arranged political marriage. Ancient artwork shows them kissing in public, holding hands and displaying affection that was absolutely scandalous for Egyptian royalty.
And also that there is no sister of Akhenaten recorded as his wife at the time when you'd expect to find Tutankhamun being born. And there are also other sources at Amarna where if there were a third queen.
When Amenhotep became pharaoh, something unprecedented happened. Nefertiti was depicted wearing pharaoh crowns and performing royal duties typically reserved for male rulers. Think about this. In a civilization where women were rarely more than property, Nefertiti was essentially the co-pharaoh in the most powerful empire on earth. She held the title of High Priestess, meaning citizens could only access their gods through her. Contemporary inscriptions describe her as being in charge of and heavily involved in all aspects of the royal court.
But between 25 and 35 actually works quite nicely for Nefertiti, because she presumably will have married Akhenaten when she was in early to mid-teens, late 15. And then she has a career of the 17 years of her husband's reign, plus at least 3 years following on from that as female king Neferuaten.
But here's where things get dark. Together with her husband, who changed his name to Akhenaten, Nefertiti orchestrated the most radical religious revolution in Egyptian history. They didn't just introduce a new god. They completely destroyed the old religion that had sustained Egypt for over 1,000 years. Imagine if someone today suddenly declared that all churches, mosques, and temples were illegal, fired every religious leader, and forced everyone to worship only one deity. That's essentially what Nefertiti and Akhenaten did. They shut down temples, displaced thousands of priests, and forced the entire population to worship Aten, the sun god. This religious coup made them incredibly wealthy and powerful, but it also created enemies who would stop at nothing to destroy them. And those enemies might have succeeded in ways more brutal than anyone imagined. The City of Secrets. How do you erase someone so powerful that even their city disappears from history? To understand what happened to Nefertiti, you need to understand the sheer scale of her and Akhenaten's ambitions. They didn't just change Egypt's religion. They built an entirely new capital city in the middle of the desert and forced 50,000 people to relocate there. This new city, called Akhetaten, was unlike anything Egypt had ever seen. It was built specifically for their new religion, with temples that had no roofs, so the sun god's rays could shine directly inside. The city had space for 50,000 inhabitants and was constructed with incredible speed. Essentially an ancient megacity built in just a few years. But here's the terrifying part. After Nefertiti and Akhenaten died, their successors didn't just abandon this city. They systematically destroyed it. Every building was dismantled brick by brick. Every monument was smashed. Every inscription was chiseled away. In less than 30 years, this massive city was completely erased from the landscape. The level of hatred required to undertake such complete destruction is almost incomprehensible. This wasn't just political disagreement. This was a coordinated effort to erase Nefertiti and Akhenaten from existence itself. Workers went through Egypt with chisels, removing their faces from every carved relief, scratching out their names from every inscription. They wanted to ensure these two rulers could never reach the afterlife, which to ancient Egyptians was worse than death itself.
Body has very, very serious facial wounds, thought to be caused by tomb robbers who hacked through wrappings to get at the valuables.
But if their enemies went to such extreme lengths to erase them from history, what did they do to their actual bodies? The answer might be more gruesome than anyone expected. The mummy that tells a horror story. In 1898, archaeologists discovered 3 mysterious mummies hidden behind a secret wall in the Valley of the Kings. These weren't the tomb's original occupants. They had been moved there, probably to protect them from grave robbers. Among these mummies was one that would become the center of a forensic investigation worthy of a modern crime drama. The mummy, known as the Younger Lady, appeared to be a woman who died between the ages of 25 and 35. She was found alongside Queen Tiye, who was identified through DNA testing as Tutankhamun's grandmother and Akhenaten's mother.
So on that basis, I think a reasonable case can be made for the Younger Lady being Nefertiti and simultaneously Tutankhamun's mother. The age of the body has been estimated at between 25 and 35.
The placement suggested this younger woman was also an important royal family member. For over a century, this mummy remained a mystery. Then in 2010, scientists conducted DNA analysis that revealed something shocking. This woman was definitely the mother of Tutankhamun and was married to someone who was either her full brother or the product of multiple generations of first-cousin marriages. Egyptologist Aidan Dodson spent years analyzing this evidence and concluded that all the genetic and circumstantial evidence points to one person: Nefertiti. The age range fits perfectly, the family connections make sense, and the royal burial location confirms her importance. But when scientists used CT scanning technology to examine the Younger Lady's head in detail, they discovered something that would change everything.
When the body was CAT scanned a few years ago, the analysis showed that there were fragments in the sinuses which wouldn't have been there if the body had been a dried husk when it was damaged. All of which would suggest that if this is correct identification of it, and even if it isn't Nefertiti, still the mother of Tutankhamun, that she died a horrible death, whether by accident, design, disguised design as an accident.
This wasn't just an ancient mummy. This was a 3,000-year-old crime scene. The scans revealed massive facial trauma that could only mean one thing. This woman had been brutally murdered, and the evidence was still written in her bones. The evidence of ancient murder. When forensic experts examined the CT scans of the Younger Lady's skull, they found something that would make their blood run cold. There was a huge hole on the left side of her face, but this wasn't damage from tomb robbers or natural decay. This was evidence of violence. Inside her sinuses, scientists discovered fragments of jawbone and other debris. Here's the crucial detail. This debris could only have gotten there if the damage occurred while the person was still alive and breathing.
But when the body was CAT scanned a few years ago, the analysis showed that there were fragments in the sinuses that could only have got there if the body had been alive at the moment the wound was inflicted.
When someone dies, their sinuses drain and collapse. For bone fragments to be embedded inside them means the trauma happened while blood was still flowing and the person was still conscious. The wound pattern suggests a blow from an axe or a similar heavy weapon. The impact was so severe it would have caused hemorrhaging and death within minutes from either blood loss or shock. This wasn't a quick, clean assassination. This was a brutal attack that would have been terrifying to witness. Think about the implications here. If this really is Nefertiti, it means one of the most powerful women in ancient history was murdered with an axe to the face. But who would have had access and motivation to kill a co-pharaoh in such a brutal manner? The timing provides a clue. Nefertiti disappears from historical records around the same time that political tensions were reaching a breaking point. The expensive religious revolution was bankrupting Egypt. The displaced priests were furious, and the common people were suffering under the economic strain of building a new capital city. Some experts believe Nefertiti may have continued ruling alone after Akhenaten's death, which would have made her an even bigger target for those wanting to restore the old ways. The hidden tomb theory. Archaeologist Nicholas Reeves has proposed one of the most mind-blowing theories in modern Egyptology. Nefertiti might be hiding in plain sight, buried in a secret chamber behind the walls of the most famous tomb in the world, Tutankhamun's burial site.
Nicholas Reeves believes the ancient queen's tomb is actually located behind that of Tutankhamun.
That originally this entire wall was painted and decorated in order to make people think there was nothing further beyond.
The evidence for this theory is surprisingly compelling. When Howard Carter discovered Tut's tomb in 1922, he noticed something odd about many of the burial items. The famous golden mask has distinctly feminine features. Several pieces show clear evidence of having names changed or modified after they were made. The tomb itself seems too small and hastily prepared for such an important pharaoh. Reeves used advanced radar scanning technology and detected what appeared to be sealed doorways behind the tomb's painted walls. His theory is that Tutankhamun was actually buried in the outer chambers of Nefertiti's much larger tomb, with the queen's burial chamber still sealed and untouched behind a hidden wall. Think about what this could mean. While the world has been searching for Nefertiti's lost tomb for over a century, she might have been lying just a few feet away from the most viewed archaeological site on Earth. Millions of tourists have walked past her potential burial chamber without knowing it. The Egyptian government has conducted multiple scanning attempts to investigate these hidden chambers. Ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and other advanced technologies have all been used. The results have been frustratingly inconclusive. Some scans suggest empty spaces behind the walls, while others show solid rock. In 2018, Egyptian authorities announced they considered the case closed and that nothing more would be found in Tutankhamun's tomb. But until those walls are physically broken open and explored, the possibility remains that Nefertiti could still be waiting to be discovered, along with treasures that would dwarf even Tutankhamun's golden hoard. The forgotten mummies. There's another set of mummies that most people have never heard of, but they might hold the key to solving this mystery. In 1817, the famous explorer Giovanni Belzoni discovered an unfinished tomb known as KV-21. Inside were two female mummies that have been largely ignored by mainstream archaeology. These mummies had a rough existence. When Belzoni found them, they were in reasonably good condition, but the tomb was later flooded for years, leaving both mummies submerged in water. Visitors came and went, taking souvenirs, including the mummy's hair. By the time archaeologists rediscovered them in 1989, they were in terrible shape.
Rediscovered, now known as Mummy 21A and 21B, CT analysis was conducted And the CT results are interesting. So by now, Mummy 21A had actually lost her head, and her body was in pieces. She had postmortem fractures with some body parts missing.
The mummy known as KV-21A had lost her head entirely. Her body was scattered in pieces throughout the tomb. The second mummy, KV-21B, was in slightly better condition, but still severely damaged. One eye was missing. Her nose was gone, but enough remained for scientists to determine that she had died in her 40s. Here's where things get interesting. Both mummies had bent elbows and clenched fists, which are classic signs of royal mummification. They were buried together, suggesting they were mother and daughter. DNA analysis attempted in 2007 and 2009 was largely unsuccessful due to the severe degradation. But some connections were made. The headless KV-21A was linked through partial DNA to the stillborn children found in Tutankhamun's tomb. If KV-21A is one of Tut's sisters, then KV-21B would be her mother. And according to historical records, the only person who fits that description is Nefertiti. Filmmaker Curtis Ryan Woodside has conducted his own investigation of these forgotten mummies and believes he's found the evidence that everyone else missed. The facial reconstruction bombshell. Woodside took a unique approach to investigating KV-21B. Instead of relying solely on degraded DNA, he focused on facial reconstruction and comparison with known depictions of Nefertiti. What he discovered was startling. Despite the severe damage to KV-21B's face, enough bone structure remained to attempt a reconstruction. The mummy had a long, slender neck, one of Nefertiti's most famous features. The jawline was strong and pronounced, matching artistic depictions. Most remarkably, traces of painted eyeliner were still visible on the mummy's face, applied in the thin style that we associate specifically with Nefertiti's iconic bust. Using digital reconstruction techniques, Woodside recreated what this woman would have looked like in life. He took the intact eye from one side of the face, duplicated it, and aligned it with the skull structure to create a symmetrical reconstruction. The results were striking. The reconstructed face showed the same jowls near the mouth that appeared in Nefertiti's Berlin bust. The lines under the eyes matched perfectly. The cheekbones, nose shape, and lip structure all aligned with known representations of the queen. Even more compelling, the overall facial proportions matched the grid system that Egyptian artists used to ensure consistent royal portraits. But here's the really shocking part. Recent CT scans of the famous Nefertiti bust in Berlin have revealed that the smooth, perfect face we all know is actually a heavily modified version of the original sculpture underneath. The limestone core shows wrinkles, a bumped nose, and less defined features, suggesting the royal sculpture created an idealized propaganda version of the queen. This means the real Nefertiti probably looked more like the damaged mummy in KV-21B than the flawless beauty we see in museums, making the facial reconstruction evidence even more compelling. The poisonous beauty secret. While everyone focuses on murder and political conspiracies, there's another possibility for how Nefertiti died. One that's both ironic and terrifying. She might have accidentally poisoned herself with her own cosmetics. In 2009, scientists made a shocking discovery when they analyzed a tiny flask belonging to Queen Hatshepsut, another powerful Egyptian queen. The flask had remained sealed for over 3,000 years, and when researchers finally opened it, they expected to find perfume. Instead, they found ancient skin cream with a deadly secret. Chemical analysis revealed the cream contained coal tar derivatives, creosote-like substances, and other compounds that we now know can cause cancer. Hatshepsut died of bone cancer, and scientists believe her beauty routine may have slowly poisoned her over years of use. This discovery opened up terrifying questions about Egyptian cosmetics in general. The famous kohl eyeliner that Egyptian royalty used contained lead compounds. Many beauty products included mercury, arsenic, and other toxic materials. The Egyptians had no idea these substances were deadly. They actually believed many of them had protective or magical properties. Nefertiti was famous for her beauty, and maintaining that appearance would have required daily use of these cosmetic products. If she used lead-based makeup around her eyes for decades, applied mercury-containing creams to her skin, and used other toxic beauty products, she could have been slowly poisoning herself while trying to maintain her legendary appearance. The irony would be profound. The woman whose name literally means "the beautiful one has come," potentially killed by her own pursuit of beauty. Her legendary appearance, preserved forever in the Berlin bust, may have been the very thing that destroyed her. However, this theory has one major flaw. It doesn't explain the violent facial trauma found on the younger lady mummy, suggesting that if this is Nefertiti, her death was sudden and brutal, rather than a slow poisoning. The Victorian Horror Show. There's a dark chapter in archaeological history that most people don't know about, and it might explain why Nefertiti's mummy has never been found. During the Victorian era, there was a popular and horrifying practice called mummy unwrapping parties. These were social events where wealthy Europeans would gather to watch ancient Egyptian mummies being unwrapped and destroyed for entertainment. The practice started in the early 18th century with public demonstrations supposedly for scientific purposes, but quickly devolved into macabre dinner party entertainment. The most famous practitioner was an Englishman named Thomas Pettigrew, who became known as Mummy Pettigrew. He turned mummy unwrapping into a spectacle, hosting elaborate parties where the social elite would eat dinner while watching him destroy 3,000-year-old human remains. These events were so incredibly popular throughout the 1800s. The combination of death, mystery, and pseudo-scientific investigation created an irresistible cocktail for Victorian audiences. The last recorded mummy unwrapping party occurred in 1908, meaning over a century of systematic destruction of Egyptian remains. But the horror doesn't stop there. Mummies were also consumed as medicine, ground up, and sold as medicinal powder. They were used to make paint pigments, particularly in a color called mummy brown that was popular with artists. Victorian tourists bought mummy parts as souvenirs, and countless remains were sold to private collectors. Thousands of mummies were destroyed during this period, including potentially hundreds of royal figures. The documentation was often poor or non-existent, meaning we'll never know what was lost. Given that Nefertiti's mummy has never been positively identified despite over a century of searching, it's entirely possible that her remains were discovered by early archaeologists, went unrecognized, and were subsequently destroyed during one of these Victorian entertainment spectacles. The DNA Detective Revolution. The breakthrough in Nefertiti research came through advanced DNA analysis and genetic fingerprinting techniques that didn't exist until the 21st century. Scientists can now extract ancient DNA from mummies and compare it across multiple specimens to establish family relationships with incredible precision. The 2010 study that changed everything used genetic fingerprinting to look at short tandem repeats, repeated sequences found in non-coding regions of DNA that vary between individuals. By comparing these patterns across multiple microsatellites, researchers can determine not just if people were related, but exactly how closely. The process is like solving a 3,000-year-old paternity test. Scientists extracted DNA from deep within bones to avoid contamination, then compared the genetic signatures of multiple mummies from the New Kingdom period. They even genotyped everyone involved in the study to make sure no modern DNA had contaminated the samples. The results were revolutionary. They could definitively prove that certain mummies were parents, children, or siblings of each other. The younger lady was confirmed as Tutankhamun's mother. Queen Tiye was confirmed as his grandmother. An entirely new family tree of Egyptian royalty emerged from these genetic investigations. But ancient DNA analysis is incredibly challenging. The genetic material degrades over time due to environmental factors, chemical processes, and microbial decay. The mummies in KV-21 were particularly problematic because they had been submerged in water for years, which severely damages DNA. Despite these advances, the technology still has limitations. Until more sophisticated techniques are developed, some mummies may never be definitively identified, leaving the Nefertiti mystery partially unsolved. The international conspiracy. There's a hidden dimension to the Nefertiti story that involves international politics, stolen artifacts, and cover-ups that continue to this day. The famous Nefertiti bust in Berlin may itself be at the center of a century-old deception. When German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt discovered the bust in 1912, he used questionable methods to get out of Egypt. According to official documents, he was supposed to share all discoveries equally with Egyptian authorities. Instead, he allegedly showed the Egyptian inspector only a poor-quality, incomplete photograph of the bust that made it look like a minor piece rather than a masterpiece. The inspector, Gustave Lefebvre, was tricked into believing he was looking at the bust of a princess rather than a queen. By the time the deception was discovered, the bust was already in Germany, where it became a symbol of German archaeological achievement. Egypt has been demanding the return of the bust for decades, but Germany refuses. The artifact has become too valuable and too symbolic to give up. Some critics argue that this political standoff has actually hindered legitimate scientific research into Nefertiti's identity. But here's where the conspiracy gets deeper. Author Henri Sterlin spent 20 years investigating the bust and concluded it's actually a fake, a modern copy created by Borchardt to cover up an archaeological experiment gone wrong. According to this theory, Borchardt had a copy made to test ancient sculpting techniques. But when visiting German royalty saw it and were impressed, he couldn't admit it was a reproduction. German authorities have allegedly pressured experts to stop investigating these claims. Renowned archaeologist Dietrich Wildung initially supported Sterlin's research, but after being appointed director of the Berlin Museum housing the bust, he suddenly reversed his position and refused to discuss the matter further. If the most famous image of Nefertiti is actually a fake, it means we've been searching for a woman who might look completely different from what we expect, making the mummy identification process even more complicated. The race against time. Archaeological sites across Egypt are under constant threat from climate change, urban development, political instability, and simple neglect. Every year that passes increases the chance that crucial evidence will be lost forever. The tombs in the Valley of the Kings are deteriorating due to humidity from tourist breath, vibrations from nearby construction, and natural geological processes. Many mummies are degrading faster now than they did during their first 3,000 years underground, thanks to exposure to modern air pollution and temperature fluctuations. Political upheaval in Egypt has also affected archaeological research. Security concerns have limited access to sites, reduced international collaboration, and diverted resources away from preservation efforts. Some of the world's leading Nefertiti researchers have been unable to conduct field work due to these restrictions. Meanwhile, new technologies are emerging that could revolutionize ancient DNA analysis. Next-generation sequencing techniques are becoming more sensitive and better suited for heavily degraded genetic material. Advanced facial reconstruction algorithms are getting more accurate. Ground-penetrating radar and other scanning technologies are becoming more precise. But these technologies are expensive and require international cooperation to implement effectively. The political tension surrounding Egyptian artifacts, combined with limited research budgets, mean that crucial investigations are being delayed or canceled. The tragic irony is that we might have all the pieces needed to solve the Nefertiti puzzle right now, but political and logistical barriers are preventing scientists from putting them together before time runs out. So after examining all the evidence, conspiracy theories, scientific analysis, and cover-ups, what's the shocking truth about what happened to Nefertiti? The evidence points to a conclusion that's more disturbing than any single theory alone. Nefertiti wasn't just a victim of one conspiracy. She was the target of multiple attempts to erase her from history, both ancient and modern. The most shocking truth is that solving the Nefertiti mystery isn't just about identifying an ancient mummy. It's about uncovering a conspiracy that has lasted for over 3,000 years. From the ancient priests who tried to erase her memory, to the Victorian collectors who destroyed countless mummies for entertainment, to the modern politicians who treat archaeological evidence as diplomatic bargaining chips, Nefertiti has been the victim of one of history's longest cover-ups. But now, at least, we know it's a mystery with blood on its hands.